Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and welcome to the Post 151 Academic Leadership with Authenticity. Now, as you know, once a year we have a bit of a detour in the vlog and we have a special guest. Now, I know for many of you this is your favourite vlog, and I try not to take this seriously, but I thought this year we would focus on a very specific topic that enables very specific professional development for you all. I thought this year, noting the state of the planet, we would talk about academic leadership. We would also talk about authenticity, and all the words in that title really matter. I treat academic leadership as a compound noun, not an adjective and a noun. I believe the academic components of leadership are just as important as the leadership variable. So you can't move from, say, running food leadership, running a supermarket, to running a mining industry and think that is the same generalizable data set to running a university department. So we're going to look at the bespoke, the customized nature of university leadership, academic leadership this week. And look, certainly my path to leadership was a very negative one. I was treated, as so many of my colleagues were and so many students were, I was treated dreadfully when I moved to Canada. I was moving to Canada to stay in Canada, to transform my life and to retire in Canada and live happily in my retirement there. Unfortunately, a truly appalling leader destroyed my life, destroyed my hopes, and destroyed my dreams. But quite wonderfully, I hope, the story didn't end there. The decision I made after going through that experience and seeing so many of my colleagues go through that experience is I said never again. I made a decision at that point that I would attempt to move into academic leadership so that no other human being on my watch would ever be treated in that way again. And I hope for the thousands or so of people and students and colleagues that I've met through that leadership journey, I hope it's been useful. I hope it's been okay for you. But this week, we're talking with Professor Jamie Quinton, who is a head of school, probably the most difficult role that exists in a university system. And his school is larger than most faculties, larger than most colleges. So what I want to do with our conversation with Jamie this year is talk about him and his pathway and decision-making into leadership, where he is now, and perhaps the vista going forward. So let's talk with Jamie now. Hello, everybody. We're back. Happy anniversary, Jamie.
Happy anniversary.
Now,
hello.
Now, I know he is so young and incredibly gorgeous. And I'm going to take Jamie back in time a little bit when he was even younger, but not more gorgeous. Jamie, I wanted to talk about you in leadership during your undergraduate years and also as it moved into a doctoral program. So, and this is about awareness. So this is sort of thinking back on your past. Were you aware of academic leaders, vice chancellors and pro-vice chancellors and deputy vice chancellors as an undergraduate and as a PhD student? Who were these people and did they have any impact or role on your life?
That's an interesting question. I mean, when you're a student, as an undergraduate student, I wanted to understand how university works. So I became aware of who the people were, what roles they had, what titles they had. But like every student, you just automatically assume that the further up the hierarchy you go, the more senior the person is, and the longer they've been around, and the more they must know. You would take that for granted, surely, that's the case. And when you're an undergrad, you don't really interact with people much unless you need to. And I did have the opportunity to interact with someone who was a deputy vice chancellor when I transferred my undergrad from UNSW to Newcastle, because the person who was the head of school and who was it was on the week that he transitioned from it might have been head of faculty to deputy vice chancellor research. And I met him. I talked about what I studied at UNSW to get credit transfer.
Yes.
And I had the opportunity to meet him in that regard. And what was also unique about that was that person was Professor Ronald MacDonald at Newcastle University, and he was my then head of school and head of the research group I did my PhD with. He was his supervisor, so he had been at Newcastle quite a long time, and yeah, and I of course. I didn't really know what a deputy vice chancellor did at that time, or even what a dean of a faculty did at that time. This was just someone of importance that I had to interact with and explain the kinds of things that I studied in my courses, so that he understood whether it was compatible with what they were doing at Newcastle, and I could get credit for it or not. Um, apart from that, so as an undergrad, everybody is a big deal, right? Every lecturer, every professor, every person you encounter, at least in our day, because in our day, of course, we bowed at the font of knowledge. The knowledge, it was the people who were teaching were the knowledge providers, and the knowledge was held by them.
That's right.
So that was a part of that hierarchy, that training that happened at the time.
Yeah, the Jedi Knight, Jedi Master Padawan.
Yeah, yeah,
And, people critique that model of teaching and learning, but it had some benefits as well. But I think what
yeah.
Jamie's told us there is that particular model of leadership was you'd only engage with them if, inverted commas, something went wrong or something was a bit
Only
missed.
if you needed to.
So you were transferring, so you're after credit transfer, you're moving
Yeah.
universities, academic integrity, academic misconduct.
Yeah.
That's when you would see one of these people. Otherwise, they're invisible. But I want to now move post your postdoc. I want to move to when you had your first role at Flinders University. So you were brought in as a very junior academic.
As a lecturer, yep.
As a lecturer, which is, pretty in the hierarchy for our friends around the world. That's sort of the first rung as an academic, right? And you were teaching all hours that God sent. You were building up the physics program, writing curriculum, but you didn't have much autonomy or say over wider teaching and learning issues or research. You were just working hard and pretty well doing what you were instructed to do. As you moved into that role, how did your understanding of leadership change again?
Well, that was interesting. So you've
Reified?
yes, you have.
Right.
You've reified the fact that I was under instruction. In fact, I wasn't really under instruction. I was encouraged to be autonomous, and I was encouraged to innovate, to rethink, because what I arrived at was quite stale. In fact, I arrived in the middle of the year, and I was really fortunate that I was given, like most people when they're hired as a lecturer, and this is a level B lecturer.
Yeah.
I had a probation. And it was a 6-month probation. Actually, it was a 3-year probation. It was 3 years probation, and I mitigated the probation by first applying for probation and then handing that in as a promotion application to senior lecturer. But I was encouraged to observe, to innovate, to adopt and enact change. Yeah. And that was by my head of school, who knew how stale everything was. Yeah. At the time, Flinders was living on its past glories. It had downsized. The physics group had downsized. Yeah. There were great names. People like Eric Weigold, who went to ANU and was head of ARC and had buildings at ANU named after him and so forth. Yes. These were people who were at Flinders. Flinders physics was really strong in Australia in the 1970s and the 1980s. Yeah. And I arrived around 2003. And I remember in that first semester, so unfortunately, one of the senior colleagues who was the Physics 1B course coordinator, topic coordinator, at Flinders they're called topics, he had a heart attack about a week before I arrived. So, so I was given the topic coordination of Physics 1B, but I didn't have any teaching obligations in it. So what I did was I hung around all of the lab classes and met the students and heard from the students. And they were basically telling me that physics was evil. They just couldn't wait till 5 p.m. so they could get out of there. Yeah. And that was the beginning of a rethink of Physics 1. And my head of school was hands off. He was not not in any way dictating or directing what I did. So I had one of those moments in a trial by fire where I was encouraged to do something, and I grabbed it with both hands and I did everything I could with it. Um, so that's not leadership in the traditional sense of a person is a leader and a person who is leading is instructing a follower on what to do to follow.
Yes.
This was the opposite. This was discovery. It was a discovery version of leadership where I was given a leadership task and I had to lead it, but I also had to think carefully about how I engaged with it and how I went about it.
Very clever.
And then the rest of that story goes that I not only developed the entire first year curriculum at Flinders for Physics 1, but it ultimately ended up being as part of a study that Les Kirkup, who was an ALTC fellow, it became the most exemplary first year physics experience in Australia across all of the universities. And that took a lot of design, a lot of thinking, a lot of reading, a lot of
listening, bottom up followership listening.
And also it was putting the student experience as a very high priority, not without compromising academic standards, but that was in the early 2000s. That was before it became a thing that everybody wanted to do after that, which was in the 2010s, right? Student experience started becoming forefront. So that was part of that leadership journey. So I'm not sure whether you're hinting at this, Tara, or not, but in terms of trying to become a leader or thinking about leadership and stepping in as a leader, that was one of those moments where I did something. I was quite proud of it. It had good outcomes. It was good measurable outcomes. And lots of first-year students did physics at Flinders, and I think they enjoyed it. I think they enjoyed it more than they would have if it was just content-focused, which is what it was before I arrived.
Now, what's happened there? I didn't know we'd give all that answer, but that was a nationally award-winning course suite that Jamie developed there. So he's been very, very humble, as he always is. But can I say what's significant there for me that I didn't know is he had proper leadership that was not helicopter leadership. So
very much
this was a respectful leadership of all colleagues, no matter how young, no matter how junior, and giving them opportunity. So when something happened, and it's amazing how often a colleague gets sick or something weird occurs and someone has to step in at short notice, that opportunity, if you grab it, jump and the net will appear, will create something extraordinary, which is Jamie's experience. But what that has done, you've worked me out, we've been married too long, you've worked me out that I'm going to the next question now, which is one I've never asked you. It's one that tortures me. At 2:00 in the morning, I'm staring at the ceiling, worried about this question. So I will get your answer and answer it to your level of comfort. But you've got a very rare combination, which is you are an outstanding teacher and an outstanding researcher. And that combination is increasingly rare for many reasons in international higher education. But I'm asking you an even tougher question from that foundational basis. How important is the experience of teaching and research in higher education to creating high quality leadership in teaching and research in higher education?
That's a great question.
Worries me.
The answer to that question depends on how the leader views the organization and what's the purpose. That triggers a question in my mind. What is the purpose of a university? The answer to that question probably changes from one individual to the next. And the only way that can be somehow normalized, I think, is through the university strategic plans and so forth, where there is an articulation of the purpose of the university. Now, getting to your
statements and visions.
So getting to your actual question, if you see the university as a font of learning and knowledge, then the people who are practitioners who understand how to go about learning, how to develop knowledge, that skill matters because that's your core product. If you view the university like a corporation, which is a widget manufacturing facility, then the chief technical officer is the person who knows the widget and all about the widget, but the CEO of the company is someone who doesn't necessarily need to know about all the ins and outs of the widget. So they're the two extremes, I think.
Yeah.
I think we live in times where the university, the classic traditional version of a university, which started in Bologna in, the turn of the second millennium and has been in place for over 1,000 years, that was based on the model that I described in my first answer, which was the people are the holders of the knowledge. And that was how it promulgated for a millennium. Now, with the internet and the information age, information is everywhere, but knowledge is critical. You have to have the ability to understand and know what to do with the information. And that is if I reduce everything down to the number one thing, that is it. So the leaders need to at least value and appreciate that, because that is everything comes back to there. And people do that in varying degrees, and they have, now that I've been on the other side of leadership and I know what it's like to have the responsibility and the challenge and opportunities that go with trying to manage all of the resources and so forth, and being in a resource scant time, I fully appreciate that, there's a lot to do. There's a lot of things to try and mitigate. And, for 25 years, I've been saying that being an academic is a flaming chainsaw juggling act. Well, being a leader is, I don't know what else you can do to those chainsaws. They're already on fire.
They move through time.
They do move through time. Anyway, so that is part of the challenge. And the more you understand what it's like for the people at the coalface, if you like, the more you can relate to them, the more you can understand the impact of what you do and how you go about it and how it will affect their operation.
Now, interestingly, and that's a great answer. Interestingly, Jamie didn't mention credibility there, didn't mention the sort of bizarre bits of the culture that exist at the moment. So somebody who has never taught in a university and is either not research active or has never written any research suddenly ends up in a leadership position. And that is real, that is happening, that is true, and it exists around the world. And that disconnection, it is not configured as a problem in our current age. And that's interesting to me. You often heard me talk about what we don't talk about is more important than we do.
So this is about leadership and followership. And in some ways it's about what does a follower look for in a leader. Credibility is an important word, absolutely. If someone who has to follow the leader doesn't believe the leader is credible, they won't follow them.
No.
And there is no one. People are individuals, right? You've got individual behaviour, collective behaviour, and individuals. Some people define a credible leader as a leader who gives them what they want. Some people define a good leader as someone who is responsible, accountable, someone who always acts in the organization's best interest and does their best to keep things moving along, keep things operating, and try to make incremental adjustments to improve the organization. I would argue that that's management, not leadership, though, right? There's micro leadership, I suppose, when you make small changes, but proper leadership is about doing the holistic consideration of what's going on and working out how to define a forward direction and then resource and make that direction happen. And that requires disrupting the current paradigm, no matter what the paradigm looks like. And that will always upset people. People are resistant to change. People don't want to see change. But in terms of, post-COVID, resource scant universities, governments don't have a lot of resources to give to universities, and we've got a lot of frustration in the organisation because people just want to get on with it, and there's always barriers to it. That is that is what is, I think, the biggest dominant influence on the culture right now. And it's not necessarily about leadership, it's about resourcing.
It's an interesting, whereas I would argue they cluster up a little bit. And as we did,
Well, they're dependent on each other.
as we talked about yesterday, particularly say in the regional university environment, regions around the world, much more time needs to be taken in the originating decision making because there's less money if an error is made. So a lot more, a lot greater, a lot of, diversity of data sets has got to be available. You've got to look at modelling and what went right and wrong in other universities, because if universities that are really lacking resourcing make mistakes, it's catastrophic. But that means just for that originating decision, you have the experience and the expertise to know what is possible, know where the trapdoors are, and avoid them.
Yeah, I agree.
Which, of course, leads to my next question.
A good leader will value the expertise of everyone around them.
That's right. And they also hold enough in themselves that they know what is going to work and what will absolutely never work, and call the non sequiturs early. I think it's always the no's matter a great deal, I think, in leadership. So the key is at what point of your career, now this is a hard question, at what point of your career did you realise that you would like to move from a teaching and a research balance role into a leadership role? And can you remember, was there a trigger? Was there something that triggered that determination or decision for you?
Yeah, so throughout my academic career, they've kind of gone hand in hand. You see a leadership opportunity, you have a look at that opportunity, and you decide that you're going to do it or you're not going to do it. And within so being an academic means you're a person of many hats, and you get to take those hats off and put them on in different conversations with sometimes with the same people, sometimes with other people. And so throughout the academic career, there have been leadership opportunities that have come along, and I've followed what I thought was the right path for myself.
Interesting.
But to answer your question, the notion of consciously choosing to follow a leadership trajectory and put it ahead of the normal academic business as usual, which is teaching and research. That for us happened during COVID and during COVID lockdown, of course.
I wondered if you'd go there.
Yeah. So we used to during lockdown, we were only allowed out of the house once a day, which was in the early morning to get some exercise and go for a walk along the Esplanade at Brighton in Adelaide in Australia. And we were walking through one day and we were having a conversation about what we thought the universities might look like after COVID. And for me, I'd been at Flinders for 18 years. I started out as a lecturer. I made it through to professor. I had a research leadership role. I was a high degree coordinator. I was associate dean teaching and learning for quite some time. And do you reach a point where you go, this is it, this is what it's going to look like, and you're going to keep doing this until you retire? Or do you want to kick on and try, right? And try and embrace the mission at a different level, at a deeper level. And we made the decision to do that. And we enrolled in a master's degree in leadership. And ultimately it led to where I am now, which is in a leadership role as the head of school of now food technology and natural sciences at Massey. So it's not just a thought, it's an action following a thought, right? We thought about it, we made a choice, we actioned it, and we're following it through.
Now, I didn't know you'd go to that example. For me, that's where, if I was talking about where your trajectory was, I remember the morning walking along where we'd made the decision to do that master's degree. But this is just a sort of supplemental question, if I can. People can have, and there's a lot going on the planet with employability in universities at the moment, and a lot of our colleagues watching this, a lot of PhD students watching this, may have hopes and dreams and aspirations to go into a different sort of post or a different role or even a first full-time job. And Darlin, do you want to offer a commentary about, you can have the hopes and the dreams and the aspirations, but how important is the decision making and doing, enacting actions to make that happen?
I will start with my data set of one.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I've also observed this with lots of colleagues and over the years as well. Um, it's great to have hopes and aspirations. In fact, the biggest challenge a supervisor has for a PhD student is when they don't have them and they don't think about what's going to happen after they finish.
Yeah.
And those students struggle to finish. So it's definitely worth having aspirational goals and, I want to go and do this. I want to have this future in my life.
Yeah.
But you also have to have an adaptive mindset, because the path will never unfold and reveal itself in the way you anticipate or want it to unfold. And if it does unfold for you that way, kudos to you.
Yeah.
But you should never, it'd be unrealistic to expect that life is going to turn out the way you expect it to. So,
Oh,
so really it's about creating opportunities for yourself and then seizing the opportunities when they're presented to you. And you tend to create opportunities. They don't tend to just land in your lap.
really good
Um,
point.
so having the goals and aspirations means that you at least have some focus where you're going to put your energy to try and create the opportunities. If you don't have them, you'll just follow your nose and go from day to day
And get disappointed. See,
mm,
my fear is if you've only got sort of the hopes and the dreams,
mm,
when the hopes and the dreams don't happen,
mm,
that's when one enters despair and
mm,
disappointment.
mm,
Whereas if one has a scaffolded plan,
mm,
there's mitigating steps
mm,
to the aspiration, maybe?
mm. Maybe. I mean, I'm sure there are people who have aspirational goals and things, and if they're not achievable in some way, whether they're either you're kidding yourself or whether there's just no opportunity, or you can get frustrated and depressed that way too.
Yeah.
But the one thing I will tell you is, if you don't try, you won't get. And you also need to be, and academia teaches you this with writing, with publishing, with everything. You have to get used to being rejected. You have to get used to being told, no, you can't do it, because it's most likely going to happen more often than not.
Yeah.
But you will never get a yes, you can do that if you are not able to cope with not being able to do it. Right? Most people don't have a sail through life with everything happening the first time.
No one does.
No.
No one does. Well, actually, probably a few of the tech bros on the planet do, which leads to my second last question, Jamie. Again, this is a hard one because, and we've studied this too,
Mm,
separately and together.
mm,
We're seeing some appalling leadership, including academic leadership, on planet Earth right now. We're seeing, and we've all seen it through our career, misappropriated funds from leadership in universities, often called, entertainment expenses. Something's gone wrong there. We're seeing dreadful behaviour like bullying. We're seeing academic misconduct, research misconduct from other colleagues. But, we're also seeing intellectual theft
mm,
in the many manifestations of that, but also sexual assault, sexual harassment.
mm,
All of us as academics need to blink hard in the sunlight and take on board that there were academic leaders mentioned in the Epstein files.
mm,
Now, we have to all really think about that
mm,
and how that has occurred. And every one of us every day needs to enact behaviour to ensure that this never occurs again.
mm.
So this is a tough question now about why this type of behaviour exists in academic leadership, and it's reported and it's being studied pretty well on a daily basis. Reports are coming out now with bullying, sexual assault, sexual harassment, research misconduct.
Mm,
So what can each of us do every day, and what can we do as leaders
mm,
to change this culture?
mm. So when you started the question, you went on a journey I wasn't expecting, but by the end of the question, I come back to the same things I try to think about every day.
Nice.
So, well, you picked the specific example of the Epstein files. I would rather try and think about it more generally than
Please.
so.
Please.
So I think I think that a lot of the behaviors that you see are people navigating the world day by day. They do what they can. They get frustrated by things getting in the way of, their expectations are not met. They might have some disappointment. They then try to manage their disappointment, and they will do things to try and reduce their disappointment. Now, in terms of the Epstein files, based on what I know, and I know little, I think that is about academics recognizing that there are powerful people with resources, and you've seen them on sitcoms on television and movies and so forth, where the person who is dependent on some form of resource, right? They need government grants, they need some kind of resources to do what they want to do, and there is someone who's holding those resources, and then they need to try and convince that person or whatever to give them some of the resources. And unfortunately, it looks like Epstein had a lot of resources that people wanted to access. So, once you make the decision that you're going to connect with that and try and get hold of some of those resources
and dance with the devil.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
In that case, absolutely.
Yep.
Then, you find yourself in a situation probably where did they know what they were getting into? I don't know. It doesn't matter, because the thing that matters the most, and the question that matters, is the one you asked, which is what can we do as individuals about it? For me, it all comes back to integrity and ethics, right? It comes back to your principles you operate by, where the line is, where you cross the line, where you don't cross the line. And so for me, as someone who has a large number of people who I'm responsible for, and I try to care for, and I try to, create as much opportunity for them as possible to do teaching and research and training, my frustration is that I see what I thought was, when I became an academic, and I think when most people become academics in the first place, they do it because they value thinking, they value learning, right? I've been telling first year students for 25 years that I'm a professor, which is a portmanteau for professional learner. I'm there to learn. I'm not there to teach. I like teaching, but what I like is every interaction I have with every person, doesn't matter if they're a first year undergrad, they can teach me something that I don't know. And I do hope that my mind is open enough and that I'm receptive to that learning opportunity when it arises. So that's what I like about being at a university. That's what I like, is the interactions with people where I can learn from them, and hopefully they can learn from me. Right? I'm sure that they learn things from me. But we're supposed to be a learning organisation. And when we are resource scant, when we're busy, caught up in the day-to-day machinery of being a university and trying to get by, we lose a lot of our energy and we lose a lot of our opportunity, because we're not learning. We're just trying to mitigate. We're just trying to get by. And I've seen reactive environments. I've seen people being completely protective and frightened. And, once fear gets in the way, human behaviour changes, right? So all of these things are factors, but the way in which we deal with it is we have clarity of purpose, clarity of mind, remember your ethics, remember your integrity, and remain mindful of what everybody's doing, what everybody needs to do, what decisions you have and how you action them, and the impact it will have on everybody else. Really, I think that's the way forward.
Look, I think that's strong. I think that's important. And I think your focus on a resource poor environment is key, because that creates desperation. But I would argue what it also then creates for unpleasant forces in the culture is exploitation. So if we're in a resource poor environment, people who are holding some semblance of power then deploy that power to extract goods and value from other human beings. And that's the bullying, that's the sexual assault, sexual harassment.
I think some people do. For the most part, though, I don't think that is a dominant force in the sector. I think the dominant force in the sector is people being reactive because of because they need to get by the moment, right? What do we do to get past now?
Yeah. Oh, I understand that, but I think also the research has shown, particularly in Australia, can I say, that just under half of the regional universities in Australia, the academics in regional universities in Australia, have been bullied. And as the research shows internationally, the only way to manage bullying is for bystanders to be active and stop the behaviour. An individual who's being bullied can't stop the bullying. The bystanders around them can. So that's an interesting leadership role for all of us to create that herd of care and protection. Which leads to my final question for you. And this has been a really, I didn't know we'd go here, and I feel very inspired and very moved, and there's a lot to think about here, I think, colleagues. But what I wanted to talk about, Jamie, is obviously we're married and I love him to pieces, and he's a kind man. He's a brilliant man. He's a kind man, and he's a compassionate man. And I just wonder, as someone who is in, a leadership role in incredibly tough times for our universities, whether compassion and care is fuel that you exhaust. So how do you keep buoyant, optimistic, to quote Professor Haid, an infrastructure of care? How do you maintain that infrastructure of care and compassion rather than allow the compassion fuel to ebb in your own vehicle?
That's a great question. The good news is that most people are not someone who exhausts your energy, right? I think being compassionate and caring for people and being kind to people is still important. It's critical. You have to do that. The older I get, the more I appreciate the importance of people in what we're doing.
That's lovely.
Because I've seen people treated very badly during my academic career. And it's all right. My brain is going 12 different directions. That's why I'm trying to focus my thoughts. So I've seen people treated quite poorly, and you can always come up with a perspective that justifies it or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily make it okay.
Boom.
You have to always have respect. It's got to start with respect. Respect has to be in place the whole way through. And there may be part of being a leader is you have to make decisions and you have to do things that people won't agree with. And, when people dedicate their whole lives to what they're doing, they can take it very personally. I understand that. But you taking it personally, you being offended by it, is not a reason to not do it. So the organisation will need to make adjustments, right? It has to learn, it has to evolve. You have to learn, you have to evolve. You don't have the right to have something in a holding pattern that was created on a certain date and it stays that way for the rest of time.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So things learn, things evolve. There are factors that influence what can and can't be done.
Policy levers and so forth.
How relevant things are now, and you'll have the individual who will always believe that their thing is the most important thing in the world and everything else is of secondary importance.
Yes.
But the majority of people in my team are doing things for the right reason. They care about the trajectories of the students. They care about the learning. They care about sharing knowledge. They care about
developing knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. They care about the mission. They do care about the organisation. In fact, in some ways, they care so much about the organisation, and sometimes it gets in their way. My role is to make sure that, I've said before, staff and students are not that different, and in many ways that's true. So if you view your role as a leader being like a topic coordinator or a course coordinator, you have to do what's fair and right for everyone, including yourself. Sometimes you have to disappoint someone and say to them, look, I'm sorry, but I can't support what you're asking because it's not fair on everybody else.
Yes.
It's not the right decision to make.
Yes.
And there are people who will take it well and understand, and respect that, you didn't just come up with a whimsical idea and action it, or you've got a personal issue with an individual, right? So no in and out groups, treat everybody the same.
That's right.
People don't have to agree with you or like you, but they do need to respect you, and same for you. You need to respect everybody.
Yep.
And not hold grudges and not take anything out on anyone. So, and it is somewhat clinical. It's interesting that it's a combination of clinical and compassionate, right? Compassion.
That's interesting.
Because you have to care about the impact on the people. Because you have to step with them while they're taking a journey, especially one they're not prepared to take or don't anticipate or are going to be disappointed with.
Yes.
Yes. But I don't want to just focus on the negative stuff either. I want to focus on the positive things too. One of the privileges of leadership is you get to walk with people during their successful journeys as well.
Yeah.
And that's something so going back to your second question, that's something you learn as an academic. When you're teaching students and training students, whether it's in a postgrad setting in a lab, whether it's in a lecture room, when you see them learning, the satisfaction you get from helping them on their journey, you get that same satisfaction as a leader in a leadership role when you see you help someone develop their capacity, you help someone develop what they're trying to create for themselves.
Make it
all of those things.
Yeah.
All of those things make it worthwhile.
Oh, I think it's brilliant. And also, can I say the other crucial thing is don't do the top-down implementation. This is what is going to happen. I think it's important when we are academic leaders that we make the argument with colleagues too, that we actually present the argument, that we work with incredibly bright people. So the notion that it's sort of a top-down imposition of ideas, this is the policy lever, deal with it. I think walking with colleagues through the argument, even if we all disagree with it, at least walking through so we can all agree this is the argument and let's make the best of this situation. I think the honesty when you're working with very, very bright people is important too.
Now, I think the staff in my school will tell you that I do that.
Yeah.
And we have learned that. We've learned it through experience. We've learned it through adversity. We've learned that multiple ways, right? I've learned that as a person with a teaching leadership role where I have had to take other academic staff on a journey and say, we need to be doing this going forwards. And then asking them, collaborating with them, right? Asking them, how would you action this? How would you do this? So that they buy into it and they co-own it and they co-develop it, right? Co-design it. We learned this during COVID, the COVID semester, first semester 2020, when we had to shut the doors and send everybody home and go from being I don't want to call it didactic, but a face-to-face teaching environment to switching to online and having no professional development opportunities. We had to work it out on the fly. And if you remember that semester and you remember our article on that, I talked about the I talked about the fact that in my setting, I decided to collaborate with my first year students to help me work out the best way to design our journey for the rest of the semester. It's the same. It's a great example of what you're saying, that everybody has to work together. Right.
And where we'd finish perhaps is leadership exists in daily life. Too often I think we assume that leadership is about titles and about posh salary and about, LinkedIn posts, I'm thrilled to announce. But actually, leadership is courage in daily life. Leadership is courage to park the self, build connections, build collaborations for the greater good. And perhaps that is the archetype of what academic leadership with authenticity and integrity is. And it's different from the tech bros, and it's different from mining organisations. And I think if we can celebrate the differences about academic leadership, compound noun, and know that this is different and bespoke and special, then I think our universities have a future and a way out of some of this negativity.
There's a bit of a passion there too, right? Some of my staff will tell you that, they know that I want to make a positive difference, that my actions as the leader, I want things to be better tomorrow than they are today. And how you define, so this is back to what does success look like? How do you measure it?
Yeah.
In leadership, the success has to be about the collective. It has to be about the individuals in the collective and the collective as well, not about the leader.
Beautiful.
Right?
But thank you for that, Jamie. This is
I do want to,
yes,
sorry,
please.
I just wanted to add one last
Yes,
bit.
please.
It's always important. So one of the things that I want to try and stop is a blame culture. And when everybody's in hard times, when changes have to be made because there's got to be a downsize of some kind, no one wants to be on the wrong side of what's cut or what's affected, what's
Yes,
changed,
of
right?
course.
Where the change
People's
happens.
lives, families'
Absolutely,
lives.
absolutely. No one wants to be on that side of it. And when that happens, there's always going to be some people on that side of it. And when that happens, it's very easy to create a blame culture. So if you've got a reactive blaming culture where people are looking to blame someone or something, it actually is paralyzing. It's certainly not a learning organization, right? People have a closed mindset and they're not open. We need to switch from being that way to back to being open-minded and back to being willing to learn and not only willing, but hungry, hungry to learn.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, Jamie. I've enjoyed this a lot. I've got so much out of this conversation. And to finish with my old cliche, really it's a question in life about where we put the disappointment, right? So in our lives, we all had a notion about what a university is as a student, as an academic, as a researcher, as a teacher. And invariably these days, that is a disappointment. Where we thought we would be, we are not there. And so the question is, what do we do with that disappointment? And part of it, I think, can be that we transform our thinking about leadership. So if we do that, I think we can be, to use again the other cliche, we can be the change that we want to see.
Thank you for saying that. I also want to say that if you have a learning culture, then everybody's doing the best they can, right? So looking to remove blame from the culture, we have to recognize that everybody, including the leaders, are on a learning journey, right? They're humans. They're trying their best. Everyone's doing the best they can, and they're trying to improve the situation. And I think sometimes, or a lot of the time, the disappointment comes about because they feel that they're not getting any traction or they're not getting very far, right? Not as much as they'd like. One of the things that you learn if you do a leadership degree or you get involved in leadership training of any real deep sense, the number one thing that matters the most is your self-awareness. You need to know yourself before you can help other people know themselves, as if you're the leader. So one of the things that each person watching this can do to improve their capacity to deal with disappointment or to cope with what happens on a day-to-day basis is become more self-aware, because a lot of the problems occur when someone who isn't self-aware then takes actions that affect other people, whether you're leading or following.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, and I agree with that. And the only final point I'll finish with as we end this wonderful session, and happy anniversary, darling, it's been a basic, is, and by the way, welcome to Dunedin, spooky Dunedin. It's very, very weird lighting, I know. But can I say also the other gift is having that self-efficacy and self-awareness, that's crucial, but also the great gift of leadership is being able to park the self and build a community for the greater good. And I think that's what Jamie does every day, and that's what the best leaders do every day. So we both wish you love, light, and peace. Tara and Jamie out.